Buy, build, sell?
Find, build, sell. Yeah.
What's the sell part? Is it selling the pubs or is it selling the product in the pubs?
It's pretty much everything. So it's
Right.
It could be selling the bricks and mortar. It can also be selling yourself, not not selling your soul, but actually marketing yourself up.
Yeah, right.
So that when you go to an investor meeting, or if you're going for a promotion at work,
Yep.
you've got to be able to market yourself in a way that you can actually sell yourself.
Yep.
So that's the sell bit. Finding is really finding what you're really passionate about, but also finding what you're passionate about. And does that fit in with what profit you want to make for yourself?
Yeah, right. It's got to work all the way around, right?
And then building is just extending on that. You know what I mean? Like once you've found it, how do you build on it, and then how do you present it?
Hi everyone. In this episode, I interview Stephen Hunt, the founder of Hunt Hospitality. Starting from a $100 backyard bar, Stephen grew his business over 20 years, and it's now a multi-venue empire worth about $100 million. It was a great chat with Stephen about the importance of surrounding yourself with the right people, working hard to achieve your goals, and really, really good insights. And hope you enjoy the show and feel free to share. Thanks for joining us and welcome to the show.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Great. Tell us a little bit about your background. And I've watched a few interesting videos and read a few interesting stories on how you got into the industry. And do you want to just tell us a little bit about the first foray into the pubs business?
Yeah, well, I even before I actually legally had a job in hospitality, I was had some parties at my parents' house, and come from a big family. We always had cousins over, and so entertaining, with food and beverages, something was probably ingrained in me from a young age. And eventually, I got into the hospitality sector when I turned 18.
Right.
And worked at the local pub, and then went overseas and ran a few pubs across Ireland and England and Europe, and then came home and thought I'd better further educate myself. So after many years in the industry, I decided and did a bit more study, and I worked for a company that had 20 venues across Australia. And one of my bosses actually said to me, he said, "Oh, do you want to come to an investor meeting?" And because I'd done a bit of study in business, I went in there and I looked at his presentation. I looked at the IM that he had, and then went, I think I could do this myself. So I went back to some lawyers and accountants. We kind of made a bit of a hybrid, got all the legal side sorted, and did some fundraising. And next thing I know, we had one pub, and within a year we had 3, and now we're at 6. And it sort of escalated from 2015, till now. We bought and sold multiple venues in that time, and then as of last year, we bought 2 during COVID.
Right.
It's been a bit of a roller coaster ride, but really, really enjoyable.
Yeah, right. Stephen, how did you go through COVID? I mean, that would have been as tough as it gets, I would have thought, to be in the hospitality business. How did you guys manage it?
Well, we've had a lot of challenges over the years. There's been a lot of legislative changes to hospitality, especially pubs. So having those challenges, as an example, like GFC, which knocked a lot of businesses around, living through that and trying to work out the best way forward really helped us with COVID. And the way we were successful with GFC was getting all of our team involved.
Yeah, right.
And so when we were shut for COVID, we did the same, and we sort of got everyone in and said, look, what other skills do you have, and what would you like to be trained up in? Because we wanted to keep everyone moving, you know what I mean? It's a bit like a pilot light, so that when things opened up, we were ready to roll. So we got all the team in. We're all doing, cleaning jobs and painting and renovating. And as soon as we could open the doors to do takeaways, we did.
Yep.
And then as soon as we could, have 10 people in a venue, we did. Yeah. And we had the capacity of, I think it's over 2,000 people across all of our venues, and that went to 70. Right. So we just went, right, well, we're going to do it. And then
that was your capacity, number of customers number of patrons?
In all venues.
Right, 2,000 down to 70.
Yeah. So, we just wanted to keep in touch with our local community, and we did a community day where we do discounted meals for everyone because, we were finding it tough, but so were a lot of other people. And then obviously our stakeholders really backed us because the better we perform, the better they perform. So, suppliers, and we negotiated with everyone, and thankfully everyone was really, really supportive. So that kind of that helped us. It was kind of like a real collective approach. But yeah, we were happy to get through, and then ended up buying 2 more pubs, and we sold one of our pubs in COVID last year. So we managed to progress forward in that.
What was the motivation for buying the pubs during the middle of COVID? Was it because it was a good opportunity because of how difficult circumstances were for people? The opportunity just arose that you could get it at a discount, or was it an unusual? Sometimes those sort of, I know if you go back to the GFC for different businesses, the opportunities are once in a lifetime, sometimes in different industries, to buy businesses simply because of the hardships that there. And if you're able to have access to capital and you're in a good position, you can actually take advantage of that. Some of the best opportunities are there. Was it that type of thing with COVID?
Well, surprisingly enough, pubs actually didn't really decrease in value.
Right.
Because the valuers and the bank realised that they didn't want to pretty much decimate an industry. Because, if they just said, right, you've had no turnover for 6 months, you'd be breaching covenants, and they would have been shutting pubs left, right, centre.
Yeah.
So the assets that we bought just fit into what we want as a fund, in terms of high street location, and one of them's a coastal pub, like right on the water. So and we did well enough to renegotiate with the banks, so they were really supportive. And then we sold one of our assets. We bought it for $8.3 million in 2016 and sold that for $16 million.
Yeah, right.
During COVID. So we took advantage of the market in that regard, and then negotiated hard on the other two venues.
Yeah, okay. And in terms of as you build the business, what would you describe your biggest strengths are as a founder, as a business owner?
I think it's team building.
Right.
It's employment. It's like I've always said, it's people. So once you have the right team around you, then you're really in a good position. So that can be your accountants and your lawyers and your actual ops team.
Yeah.
I think it's really important to get the right people, because we're, despite what a lot of people think, is if the economy changes and there's a lot of discretionary spend and people can, get out and spend more, well, that's an economic thing, the community. Despite what everyone will say, it's not just because of them. Every operator goes, oh, wow. It's, not their specific reason. But when times are tough, then you really want a team of people who dig in, who say, right, we're here for the long haul. And so that's really important for our fund. And I believe that's what got us through COVID. And I think that's the fundamental of all businesses. And then probably adding on to that is you've got to have the right processes. So for us, it's, everyone knowing where every dollar is being spent, really good cash flow, marketing and all those sort of things. So it's having the right processes. But fundamentally, if you've got the right people, they build the right processes. So it always comes back to people. And
from a business background point of view, were you always going to be in business, or was the hospitality the sort of the first love? How did it? What was the pathway?
I think when I was about 8, my father was a pretty successful accountant, and there was all this talk about companies. Yeah. And I made my first transaction when I was 4, selling Lego to a neighbour. It was one of those things that I thought about was. My mum actually said, "Oh, your neighbour goes, I want to buy your Lego," and I was, he was probably 6. And I was thinking, I'll sell the box. And my mum just said to me quietly, why don't you sell each individual piece and see what that adds up to be, and see if that sells for more. And I, thought the more I sell it for, the more lollies I can have, so.
Fair enough.
But mum said, well, look, if you sell them at that price, he won't buy them because he can go and buy it at the shops. So you have to be in between. So that, I guess, was a lesson in sort of market rates, market value.
Yeah.
And then moving forward a few years, so I did well out of it and, bought my lolly, so that was a win. And then when I was about 8, I heard my dad talking about all these different companies. I thought, right, I'm going to have a company one day.
Yeah.
And then I saw a few friends of his who were just really decent community-based people, and they were publicans.
Yep.
So then I started thinking, these guys are good people. I'd like to work in a career that they're involved with. So things just progressed, and every couple of years, you have those light bulb moments, and then all of a sudden you're in the career, and start studying, and just kind of escalates from there.
Yeah, okay. And how old were you when you bought your first pub and started actually going into business for yourself?
So I had been a part owner with my family.
Yep.
In the pub I'm in now, which is in Newcastle.
Yeah, okay, yeah.
And I set up the fund. So that was nearly 20 years. It's 20 years ago.
Right.
And then I set up the fund in 2015. So it was a long haul, a lot of experience in that period and a lot of study that I did. I had a couple of trips over to Harvard, which was a really good experience in terms of putting myself in the right room and meeting the right people.
Yeah.
And then in 2015, after being with my old boss and being an ops manager for him for a short period of time, really taught me about the ins and outs of having multiple venues.
Right.
So that was 2015. That was July. And in November, boom, we bought the first pub in the fund.
Yeah, okay.
So
it's been a quick or busy last few years, that's for sure, by the sounds of it.
Yeah, and it's, I didn't really realise it until you look back, because you're just doing your job.
Yeah.
My job's to grow the fund, and firstly, it's to supply good service and entertainment for my customers. So once you get that right, then it moves on to what have I got to provide for my investors?
Yeah.
And then if that's growth, then I've got to provide that growth. So just focusing on those little things, really then, and day by day, then sort of, it all falls into place.
Yeah, okay. And so you've got through COVID, and the next step, everything we're seeing from investment markets now is everything's about inflation and rising costs, and you can't get people. How is everything that's sort of post-COVID, I guess, and not that we're really post-COVID, but we pretty much are. I think people have sort of started to ignore it and move on. In the last sort of 6 months, though, it's moved to a different phase of challenges, especially in your industry. Are you seeing those types of things in terms of price increases or energy increases, price increases, and difficulty getting people and wages, that sort of stuff? Are you seeing that in your business?
Not so much price increasing at the moment, because we've got, like I said, good stakeholders. Our suppliers are really good. Our energy contracts are fixed.
Yep.
So once we've got to take care of that component, we've got really good deals with our financiers. And also, people talk about, interest rates rising. Well, there's always a time when you can fix.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So you can fix and take care of that part. And then it goes back to your people, employing the right people. We've won quite a few awards, and so that's attracted a lot of people. We've got our executive chef who applied for a job, and he used to work with IHG, so International Hotel Group. So they've got businesses all around the world. So by winning those awards, it's attracted a lot of better talent to our team. So sort of controlling each element as best you can then ensures you get the best result.
Okay. It's interesting you talk about the awards and those sorts of things. It's it does have an impact, doesn't it? And not only that, it shows that people are noticing just how much you care about your business and the way you go about it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, the team get excited. Everyone we love our awards nights, because if we win, we get to party. So having a young team, there's more than just the accolade itself. It's the party as well. But no, it gives everyone a real lift. You're in
the right industry to fund those parties as well, I guess.
That's right, yeah. Market research, you like to call it. So.
Oh, yes, deductible expense, no doubt. And on the flip side in terms of your strengths around team building, what would be what you'd consider your biggest weakness, and how do you overcome that in terms of the business and how you move forward?
So previously, my biggest weakness was being a control freak, because when you run one venue, like, every cent really counts. And when you do bigger venues, that does too, but you have to let go of some of the responsibility. So up until probably 3 years ago, I didn't have an ops manager, didn't have an executive chef, but had an admin team.
Right.
And, within a short space of time, you realise you can't do it all. So then I put on an executive chef, and then we put on our director of ops and marketing. And since then, letting go of a lot of things, the business has flourished. So you can't do it all yourself. So that was probably my biggest weakness.
And do you feel the benefits of that in your day-to-day now, knowing that you've got the right people in those spots doing those roles? It must be a relief knowing that you've got people that are experts in that field doing that particular role. When you move on from that, when you do that transition,
Yeah, for sure. Because you can focus on your strategy.
Yeah.
And you just kind of oversee everything. You know what I mean? You obviously have to let people have their own stamp on certain things.
Yeah.
But, for me, it just takes me back to what I really should be doing, which is, talking to investors, making sure our trustees happy, dealing with the financiers all the time and the suppliers and all those sort of things. So really working on what we're doing next, So to be able to do that and have the time to do that and to make the right decisions and to consult with the lawyers and accountants and get it right, it's so much easier for me now just to focus on that.
Yeah, okay. And in terms of would that be amongst your best decisions you've made in the business as you've gone along?
Yeah, I'd say so. Probably the very smartest decision I made at the start was I sold a residential property and had 400 grand, and then I got other investors to buy the first pub.
Yeah.
And when you're starting out, I think it's good to stretch yourself.
Yeah, okay.
Because if you stretch yourself a little bit, then you grow, and then you stretch yourself a little bit, you grow a bit more. And then you kind of hit a plateau where it's almost not desperate, but you don't have to worry as much because you've got this really solid core base.
Yeah.
So, you can knock back quite a few opportunities and have no regrets about it. And we can grow simply and focus on doing the day-to-day things really well. Which then obviously gets the growth, but you're not desperate to get, that next pub, we'll take that next, you know what I mean? You get to make smarter decisions.
So there's the benefits and problems that go with that. In the early days, you've got the stretch goal and you're more, not more hungry necessarily, maybe more desperate in the early days. Like anyone starting in any business, right? You've got to make ends meet and make it work, which is good too, because then when you become more successful, you've got to work out different ways to keep that hunger and strategy and motivation going, don't you?
Oh, absolutely. And probably the best example was that first pub. We had to reach certain milestones with the bank,
right?
And each 6 months, and we borrowed 70%, which was really high at the time, like obscenely high. Other places, other financiers were doing 60, and we got knocked back a lot until we found the right financier. And because of my industry experience, they came on board. And they effectively said, when you get to a certain threshold, then we'll stop the principal repayments and you'll go to interest only.
Right, okay.
And so we went from, I think it was $2.7 million debt on a 4.2, whatever the figures were, 4.2 purchase. Within 8 months, we had a reval at 5.
Okay.
So all of a sudden, we were just edging closer to getting the 50%.
Yep.
And then by the end of that year, when we bought the other pubs, we were over. So we'd fixed that LVR, and then the investors got a better return each quarter.
Yep. Frees up cash flow as well because you're not paying down principal.
Absolutely. Yeah, that's right. And we'd always go, we'll pay a little bit more down anyway, and then. So that was certainly interesting. I wouldn't go to 70% now.
Well, but when you're starting, like you say, you stretch yourself and you do what you got to do to get off the ground, right?
Yeah, it was. I look back and smile now, but it was a good lesson learned.
Yeah. And in terms of what would be the biggest mistake you've made along the way?
Probably not so much to do with pubs. Like I said, we've been really lucky. We haven't made too many big. Yeah. There hasn't been a pub that we've sold, well, even that I've been involved with, with my family and fund, that we haven't sold for, probably 60% more than what we paid for it.
Yeah, right.
And some of that's timing, some of that's improving profitability. It's just been really, really lucky. And you know what, really? It's just from working your absolute ass off.
Yeah, right.
You know what I mean?
Unrelated aspect of business, isn't it?
Well, and, even when times are tough like COVID,
Yeah.
you keep working your ass off, you're going to get there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And yeah, there has been a bit of luck for us in picking the market and certain things like that. But sort of, it's one of those things like it takes care of itself, because we work so hard. The reason why I probably work so hard is because before I had pubs was when I was younger and I had some opportunities to do with sport and I let them go and it kind of burnt.
Yeah.
And I was literally like, I'm not doing that again. Like,
Yeah.
I'm not putting myself in that position. And it was to do with rugby league and rugby union. Every time I watch a game, for a split second, I watch it and go, what if?
What could have been if you'd done the work at that time? Is that the idea?
Yeah, absolutely. And then I kind of, I don't have regrets, but it's just a thought there of, it's a reminder for me just to if you see a really good opportunity, then just absolutely go for it.
You want to leave it all out on the court or all on the field or wherever and not die wondering, right? You want to be able to have had a real crack, and if you miss out or it fails, then so be it. No, I don't think that matters, or that doesn't hurt as much as if you didn't give it everything and you left wondering.
Yeah, absolutely. And generally you find if you do give it everything, you get there.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
So find a way, I guess.
But you live the result either way, right? That's the nature of it. In terms of advice and mentors and things like that, what was the best advice you were ever given along the way?
There's been lots of good advice I've had. So one of that boss I mentioned earlier, I'll tell you his name, it's Greg Maitland. So he used to have the independent pub group. Anyway, he's awesome. He's actually a friend as well as a mentor.
Okay.
He said when you have multiple venues, he basically said, back to what we discussed earlier, you have to let go of certain things. And then he also said, but with each, specific venue, find out what its strength is and really, really go for expanding on its strength.
Yeah, okay.
Because when you have one venue, you try to make every post a winner, So you mightn't have a food venue, but you'll go, oh, we're going to have great food here and we're going to do this, we're going to do that. But really it's a late trading pub that sells lots of bourbon and has entertainment, you know what I mean? And that's So that was probably, some of the best advice to do with going from one pub to multiple pubs.
And is that something you've applied to every venue now as you've grown?
Oh, for sure. We still like to have a good offering on everything, but whatever, like for instance, the Kent where we are now, it's a late trading pub. Yeah. So people love coming here for a band. They love coming here for dance.
Yeah.
I love, function rooms upstairs. That's what it's really good at. So, yeah, we do have good food, but really we're focusing on its strength.
And you know what your bread and butter is on each of those individual venues. Have there been any that surprised you along the way where you bought it and you thought it was something or it became something or anything along those lines? Or is it pretty much you've bought them knowing what they were?
Well, coming from a family of accountants, you have to know where all the money's being made.
Right. Okay.
So when we do the DD, we go through the financials pretty heavily and look for it and see whether we can make we get really granular and we go right down to how much is a rump steak that they're paying and what is the biggest selling product, how much is they're landing a nip of bourbon. So we kind of have done all of that prior to it, and then we kind of look at it and go, okay, well, with our deals with our suppliers, is that going to improve the bottom line? But I've made mistakes to do with that. So in the late trading pub, I thought we're going to do a really good food deal, and it was seafood platters. Like, who doesn't like a seafood platter? I love it, right?
Yeah.
Apart from people who don't like seafood. But anyway, so I thought, right, we're going to run a campaign. We'll do some TV advertising and, show the $7 steaks and, really put this pub on the map. And in week one, after doing a really long campaign, we sold 2. So I'm getting the daily figures and I'm looking at it going, quantity of sales, like, okay, well, maybe tomorrow. And then when I actually started speaking to a lot of people about it, they're like, there's a simple reason why. Like, we're having our rum and Coke there at 2:30 in the morning. We're not thinking about the food or the seafood.
We're drinking, we're not eating.
Yeah.
Right.
And so that was back to play to your strengths. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
so,
okay.
I wasn't the one. I had one of those platters, so someone else had one.
So there's only really one sold. Oh, that's fascinating, right? In terms of the detail you can go into in business and some of the things that will surprise you.
Absolutely, yeah. You got to know where every cent is spent, and even for us, when we look at a venue, very roughly to start with, I look at the turnover, and then I'll go, okay, how much is on bar, how much is on accommodation, how much is on gaming, how much is in your bottle shop, and then I go, okay, well, your bar should make. I look at it like currencies, Your bar should end up making you 30%. Your food should be 10%. Gaming should be this. Your accommodation should be this. And then I look at that first before I actually go further into any details.
Yeah. So you can see within the businesses areas where you're going to be able to make improvements and so on and so forth.
Yeah, definitely.
And in terms of what advice you'd give to somebody starting in that type of business or any business really, what would be the first thing you'd tell
them? Firstly, get a good accountant, a good lawyer.
Yep.
But then for yourself, join your association.
Okay.
So if you've got a small restaurant, join your restaurant and caterers. If you're a pub, join the Australian Hoteliers Association. If you're an accountant, join the CPA and network.
Yeah.
The problem is when you start out small, you don't allocate time for doing that.
Yeah.
And it's one of those ones where you go, well, if I work, I don't have to pay the wage. Whereas if you go, hang on, I'll go there, whatever you will learn will more than cover off that 2 or 3 hours on a Wednesday night or whatever time it is.
Yeah.
And the discussions you have, I was in a Chamber of Commerce for ages, and before I realised the benefit of it, and I'd sit there and at first I just sit there and go, why am I here? And then after a while I started taking notes, and then the time started flying by. It was really quick, and then I started contributing more. And then from discussions that I had with people at the meeting, I picked up some investors worth about $1 million.
Yeah.
Just by meeting them there and the contribution you're making back to the community. Now, if I was pouring beers behind the bar, that opportunity wouldn't have happened at all. So putting yourself in the right room is really important.
Yeah, okay. In terms of business and business people, who out there inspires you or do you admire, and whether they're well known or not well known? Is there anyone out there that you sort of look at?
I like Warren Buffett, like a lot of people.
Yeah.
So
I'm a big fan. I get it. Yeah.
Because he simplifies everything right down. Yeah. Do you know what I mean? So anyone could have a discussion with him in any industry and they get what he's saying.
Yeah.
And because he's been phenomenally successful, obviously that works. But he keeps driving that success. And I'm sure he's got really good succession planning. You know what I mean? Because he's that smart that he would do it. So definitely Warren Buffett for that reason. And the other reason is he loves his McDonald's.
Yeah. He does his McDonald's and his cherry Cokes.
Yeah, that's right. So my brother actually was over there at one of the end of year discussions, and there's thousands.
Berkshire AGM.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay.
He's a big investor with them. And he went over there and he drove through a McDonald's and they picked up his Aussie accent and they said, what are you doing here? And he said what he's going to. And they said, oh, yeah, we love Warren. He comes in and has a blah, blah all the time. And it's like local Maccas. So, I think that's pretty cool.
That's amazing. You can't really go wrong with him. I mean, you only got to look at he'll buy a stock and the next day you'll see it'll be up 15% just because everyone found out that he bought it.
Yeah.
I mean, that happened just the other day with Citibank. He bought X amount of billions of dollars worth of stock and the next day it was up 15%. I think it was Citibank. I'm just trying to think who else it was. It was Activision. But yeah, anyway, you'll see that he's got to keep it under wraps because if people know what he's going to buy, he'll lose his advantage in terms of pricing. And but once he has, that stock will be up, and it's purely because everyone knows that that's what he's bought, so it must be good. And people will just dive in on that, which tells you how much due diligence a lot of people do. But but he's got the track record where you're probably as comfortable as you could be doing that. Yeah,
that's right. Yeah, and also he's, I guess, probably the third after Macca's is his ethics. You know what I mean? Like he's got a strong ethic. I remember hearing him years ago, and he used to buy a good business from people and leave the owners running it.
Yeah,
because he knew that they were good and they loved their job and they were passionate. And then he would just sort of coordinate his his supplier agreements and a few other things. So the profit just grew. So he's
Yeah.
buying a really good core. And then he's offering incentives for the guys who love their job. So all of a sudden it's going a hell of a lot better than initially. So I like how he does that,
Yeah. It's a lot of people talk like that, but there's not a lot that actually execute like he does in terms of, walking the walk after he's talked it. It's a big deal. Letting people be autonomous in how they run their businesses.
Yeah.
And in terms of a couple of things just to finish up on, any sort of favourite quote that you've got on business, leadership, or life?
You won't go broke making profit.
Yeah.
That's
that sounds like the accountant background coming out.
Oh yeah, another one is if you can measure it, you can manage it. That's they're the two classics. I guess just being loyal to yourself, really knowing what you can do and really knowing what you can do, and then also it's kind of like it's like weakness. People see asking for help is a weakness, but I see not asking for help is the weakness.
Yeah.
So don't think you're going to do it all yourself, because you won't. Yeah. I don't know all the answers to accounting questions. In fact, I know 3 parts of bugger all and even though my family are accountants, I still don't know that much. And also law. Don't just go, I think we should do this, but also too with the advice you get. It's all right for you to be involved in the strategy of it, you know what I mean? Because lawyers are very good at certain areas, and then accountants are very good at certain areas. You still got to have strategy. But always ask for help.
You've still got to have the big picture vision that brings that all together, because otherwise they'll just go off and do their accounting and they'll go off and do their lawyering, and it'll be great with what they do, but they still need that guiding or overarching strategy to bring it together, because otherwise without that they might take a little turn the other way or whatever it might be. So you've got to keep that on track. You're dead right.
And I like my discussions with them, because I'll say I've got one question, and that'll lead to a 40-minute discussion, because they'll answer that question and I go, okay, well that's fine, but what about this? And then they have to answer that question, and it's like a graph going up and down. I'm like, oh, okay, what about this? What about this? What about this? And then all of a sudden you get to an answer with either of them. You know what I mean? So asking for help is a big thing.
Okay, I like that. And what's next for the business in the years ahead? Where does this all go down the track?
We're going to pump some more money into capital expenditure.
Yep.
So we're going to renovate now while the interest rates are low, and we know we can fix at some stage, because you've got to keep, regardless of what the environment is, people will come to your venue if you're keeping it fresh.
Yeah.
We're also looking at some vertical integration. So we're looking at a few different things, like up and down the supply chain.
Okay.
So we're looking at a brewery at the moment. So there's certain synergies there. And then probably something that I really love, I'm passionate about our involvement with the community. Okay. So my kids go to a school, and we live in a regional area, and there's this thing called Cattle Club. And like coming from Sydney, I'm like, what is Cattle Club? And so they go every Wednesday and Thursday morning, and they're taught by a farmer everything about, working in ag.
Oh,
and wow. So we're working with them at the moment, so that the cattle that they produce, we're basically going to sell through our pubs in terms of the meat we sell.
Okay.
Because what we're doing is adding another arm onto what they're learning with the ag, and then seeing it go all the way through.
Yeah.
And then I see that as being a really good project to do with the local community, And then the other thing, I'm heavily involved with the Wildfires rugby shoot shield team.
Yep.
And we've been in for 18 months, and hopefully we'll make the semis this year, but we literally started from scratch. Yeah. And it's really good to be involved in that process, so that I can actually see how it goes from start to finish.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So, that's for me personally, but community is always.
And more pubs on the horizon down the track. Is that something that just depends on opportunities, or is it certain targets you're trying to hit, or is it?
Yeah, it really does depend on the opportunity. Like, it really does depend on the return I can get for investors. There's been a few that have sold for a lot of money lately, and I'm not really, investors said, and they're kind of iconic. There's a bit too much ego involved. People go, oh, wow, we'd like to own that pub. And I'm like, I don't want to own that pub unless it's making you money, or it can do. like, sure, you'll have a good-looking pub, but
Yeah.
a good pub for me is one that's making everyone a bit of money. So,
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. The rest of it's just vanity metrics, right?
yeah, don't need it.
Yeah, okay. Well, Stephen, thanks very much for joining us. It's excellent insights, really interesting, and fantastic to hear about your journey.
Yeah,
Have to have you on another time down the track.
excellent, Dion. Thanks very much for having me.
Okay, thanks very much.